Well, let's not jump out of this for a few moments. So the experience of the national security cutter and the offshore would indicate that we may be better off looking at a block buy or a multi-year procurement contract for the OPCs. Is that correct, Mr. O'Rourke?
What I would say is that the Navy's experience in reducing shipbuilding and aircraft acquisition costs through the use of both multi-year procurement contracts and block buy contracting offers an example that can be considered by this committee and the Congress for application in Coast Guard cutter acquisition. In weighing whether to do this or not, you would balance the potential savings of these contracting mechanisms against the trade-offs that I listed earlier in my opening statement.
Ms. Macklin, do you tend to agree with the theory that Mr. O'Rourke is putting forward?
I think block buy multi-year can result in savings, but I'll just mention Littoral Combat Ship. That was a block buy contract. It has not gone well, in large part because the requirements weren't firm, and now the Navy was, had 10 ships per each shipyard in these block buy contracts, and that was their strategy. So I think it can result in savings, but the key really is to have the requirements nailed down and firm before construction. You may build a few ships and then move into a block buy situation afterwards, for example. So that would be my only caveat there.
If I could just add very quickly, the Littoral Combat Ship program has had issues and controversy and difficulties, but I view those as being independent of the Navy's use of block buy contracting in that program.
Well,
and the actual construction of the ships that are under the block buy contracts under the LCS program has gone a lot more smoothly than the construction of the earlier ships that were done under annual contracting.
Why? Was it?
In part because the stability provided by working out the problems with the initial designs fed into the block buy contracts, and the shipbuilders were in a position where they could then produce them on a recurring, regular basis.
The first ships in any of these three, and I suppose the Littoral Combat Ship also, first ones are kind of like we're going to discover all the errors and mistakes and problems and hopefully know what they are and get them out of the way, and then move into a long or into a more production type procedure. Is that basically what happens all the time?
I think as a general matter, the Navy discovers design issues and experiences cost growth on lead ships that is then, yes, fed into its understanding of the remainder of the program.
These three programs are all new ships. Well, excuse me. Each program is a new program. It's a new ship that had not previously been in the fleet. Is that correct? I think so. I'm wrong?
No, the Fast Response Cutter program is well underway. And so if you were to do a contract for that program, you're in the middle of it already.
I didn't communicate well. My apologies. What I'm saying is that all three of these ships, each one is a new ship at its outset. When the contract was let, it was a new ship. The National Security Cutter is a new ship, never been built before. Going to be problems. You're going to find out that this didn't fit. You really didn't want it done that way. What you really needed was something different. It's kind of like the way it is, isn't it? I guess the point to us is we should expect that to happen with the first one off the line, gets into the water, hopefully it floats, go from there. Is that more or less correct, Admiral? And then you find the problems, you solve it, you figure out the solution to the problems, and then hopefully the next ships coming off the line don't have the same problem. Correct?
Yes, sir. There's a great deal of learning that goes along in the shipyard.
In the process. So we might expect for the first cutter coming off in any of these three, or first ships coming off in any of these three different types of ships to have problems. Right? Wrong? It's going to be perfect?
I doubt it will be perfect, but I think this is where the commercial shipbuilding best practices could help inform the OPC acquisition. They're not the same kind of ships. But the principle of building them, the whole mechanical, electrical, the basic construction of the ships, there are definitely lessons to be learned there. In the commercial world, they deliver a ship that works right off the bat. And it largely because they make sure that the design is stable before they begin construction. The Navy typically does not do that. And so I think here's an opportunity for the Coast Guard to try to get that part right on the OPC.
Very interesting. So you want to know before you begin to lay the keel what it is you want it to look like when it's completed. Is that what I heard you say?
Yes, sir.
And all of the little elements, including the unmanned aerial vehicle?
Well, those are additional capabilities, and I think here we're kind of dealing with a legacy deep water issue. When you talk about the UAS, the cutter boats, the stern doors have problems. A lot of this is the way that procurement went. It was in a sole source environment. The government had very little control over the requirements in those days. Obviously, the Coast Guard has come a long way since then.
So I think what I'm trying to get is a good sense of lessons learned, which I think is what we're here for today. The application of those lessons learned to this next class of ships.
One of the oldest lessons in shipbuilding that's been learned many times over is to avoid design construction concurrency. And the Navy has moved in recent years to get away from that and to take its designs to a high stage of completion prior to starting the construction of the ships. And the degree of completion of design has been moving upward over time. But yes, that is one of the oldest and most
Now with that
fundamental
foundation
lessons.
in place, I am out of time, well out of time, and so I'm going to yield back, but I want to come back and circle back around as to whether those lessons are being applied by the Coast Guard. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.